Yogena chittasya padena vacham alam sharirasya cha vaidikena yopakurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranchaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartra sutrasya bhashyasya krama vivaranasya cha. The most important sutra that we discussed in the Kaivalyapada is the third one, which actually puts forward a new doctrine of evolution, that is the Sankhya Patanjala view of evolution. Evolution, this is considered to be the standard representative evolutionary principle according to Hindu philosophy. It is also accepted in Vedanta, but in a different sense. As I mentioned earlier, it is this concept that Swami Vivekananda articulated in his definitions of religion and education. Religion is the manifestation of divinity already in man, and education is the manifestation of perfection already in man. These are two definitions. Now, in other words, what it essentially means is this: nature is relentlessly driving all of us towards perfection. And that perfection is already within all of us. Only the obstacles have to be removed. And removal of that obstacle is the purpose of all spiritual disciplines. This is the essence of it. So, and in a way, it's a radical contrast from the definition according to modern biology, that is evolution based on natural selection and evolution based on the survival of the fittest. One great author, and we are familiar with him, his name is Vijnana Bhikshu, who wrote the Yoga Bhashya Vartikam. It's a super commentary on Vyasa's commentary on the Yoga Sutras. He makes some very important observations. He says, Dharmasya adharma rupa pratibandha apasarana dwara karyendriya parinama nimittatvam udaharanamaha. Actually, he's commenting upon a statement that Vyasa makes in his commentary. What it essentially means is, it's an example of dharma being the cause of the change and sense organs through the removal of the obstacle in the form of adharma. In other words, when we get knowledge of anything, we are only removing the ignorance that was the obstacle in the way of our knowledge, our knowing about it. So when the obstacle is removed, then nature itself fills the vacuum. That means, again we have to take the example of the granite stone and Buddha image. And the example that Patanjali himself gives, Kshetrigavad, a farmer trying to irrigate his field. Nimittam aprayojagam pragadinam varana bhedastu tata kshetrigavad. That is a sutra, the third sutra. That's what we are discussing. That actually puts forward, presents the Patanjala Sankhya view of evolution. When we remove the obstacles that stand in the way of manifestation of the knowledge that is already within us, then the knowledge that is within us manifests, expresses itself. And when you remove the pieces of the chiseled parts of the granite stone, well, that means when you take a granite block, You want to make a statue of Buddha, you chisel if you are a sculptor, and in the process what you are doing is we are all removing the unnecessary parts, where means those parts which stood in the way of the Buddha, which is already inherent, manifesting inherently in the granite block. Or the other example from Yoga Sutra, Kshetrigavad. When a farmer irrigates the field by cutting a canal that connects the field with a river or a lake, thereby bringing water to his field, what he's actually doing is he removes the earth that was there in that part of the earth, of the place, and you remove that part of the soil from the earth, then what you see in front of you is a canal. And because of the natural tendency of water to flow from a higher level to a lower level, the water flows to the irrigation, to the field to be irrigated. So this is the example. So similarly, when you accumulate dharma, when you accumulate lot of positive vasanas, positive samskaras, positive tendencies, positive impressions and memories, what you are doing is you are removing the adharma which constitute obstacles, which stand in the way of manifesting what is there already within. What do? You cut a canal, and that involves removing the earth from that part of the land, and then water flows, manifestation happens. So obstacles are adharma, and the activity involved in removing the earth from that part of land is called dharma. Similarly, now take this in the context of spiritual life. When we do something good, where what is happening is we are actually generating something, dharma, virtues, good impressions, good vasanas. That's why for every normal person, unless he's a very wicked person, for every normal person, when he does something good, an act of kindness, immediately that person feels a kind of inner fulfillment. He may not be in the habit of doing good things all the time, but when he accidentally does something, if he's a normal person, it need not be a Buddha or a Christ, any normal man, when he does something good, maybe he may not be aware of it, but something happens to his mind, to his chittam. That is, what is that? A little bit of the dirt and filth are removed from his mind. Just as when you take a spade and remove little bit of soil from the land because you want to connect that lake with the field to irrigate the field. Similarly, when you, let's say, when you go to a public place where people gather, you may remove some stones and pebbles, thorns, so that people will feel safe to walk there. Or when you speak some good words to somebody, so that the person feels good. When you help somebody, so that person is helped. Nobody may be aware of it, but you are actually removing, maybe unconsciously removing a little bit of that earth from the land, from the soil from that land, so that the water will start flowing one day, irrigating your mind, purifying your mind. So this is the essence of it. It's a very, very famous statement from Vijnana Bhikshu. Remember, this is not Vyasa's Bhashya. This is Vijnana Bhikshu's comments on Vyasa's commentary. Vyasa is not very elaborate while commenting on these sutras. Of course, he He comments, but it is not so very elaborate. That's why dharmasya adharma rupa pratibandha. Adharma rupa pratibandha means what is the pratibandha, what is the obstacle, what's the barrier that stands in the way of the light coming to the room because the windows are closed. There is no light. Darkness is actually standing in the way of light. When darkness is removed, the light, what is happening is the manifestation of light. So that's why he says, dharmasya adharma rupa pribandha apasarana dwara karyendriya parinama nimittatvam udaharanamaka. That means, you give an example of how dharma becoming the cause for the change of body and sense organs. Now, coming to Yoga Sutra context. When you do this, you change your body, change your mind, you change your senses. This may appear to be very strange for many of you. Of course, at the physical level, you hear and you read about some ancient Indian sages. Two names naturally occurred to my mind. One is the name of Trilinga Swami, who is supposed to have lived in Benares, Kashi, and it is believed that he lived close to 300 years. And we know that he passed away sometime in 20th century. He saw Sri Ramakrishna. Of course, there's a recorded history. And it is also recorded that he was living in the 18th century, later half of 18th century. Well, through yoga practices, you can reactivate, you can redefine senses and also the body. That's the idea behind. And of course, another name that is well frequently mentioned is Shivaguri Baba, who is supposed to have born maybe in 1832 around that time, and who lived in Pashupatinath in Nepal. He is also supposed to have lived for 138, nearly 140 years. So these are two names which more or less historically accurate. So these are the great examples. So what happens, actually the body has the ability to live for long, but through eating bad food and by giving bad food to the mind, thoughts and ideas and impulses and feelings which are poisonous, bad impulses, bad thoughts and bad ideas, bad activities, all will constitute poisonous food for the body and mind. So the natural ability of the system to live for long is curtailed, it doesn't manifest. Then of course Vyasa refers to one name, Nandinama, Manushya Ishwaro Jataiva Nandishwaraha. He gives this example, that is there's an analysis of the compound, it is called Samastapada. Nandishwara. It's a man called Nandi, he became Ishwara. Supposed to be a reference to a story to a great person whose name was Nandi. He was transformed into Ishwara through his spiritual practices. And another given is given, therefore this is an example of forward movement, man becoming God. Well, you can think of the so-called mystics. Remember, when you read in Sanskrit books, Yoga Sutra books, that person became an Ishvara. We should not confuse this idea of Ishvara with the normal monotheistic concept of God. No, it's not in that sense the word is used. Ishvara here is somebody who's a master, a highly evolved soul. That's the meaning of Ishvara in the yoga context. It is not the monotheistic creator God idea that you find in popular monotheistic Hinduism or in the Abrahamic religions. It is not in that sense that the word Ishvara or God is used. It is in the sense, the highly advanced yogi. That's the real meaning of Ishvara in the Yoga Sankhya context. Yoga Sankhya philosophical systems do not accept that monotheistic idea of a Godhead as found in the popular Hindu, Christian, Jewish or other traditions. So, this is an example. Somebody can become divine, highly evolved, spiritually by evolving beyond the normally defined human dimension. Another example is Nakusha Ajagaradeyaha api Vyakheya, means this again is a story of Nakusha. Nakusha was he was a king. He is the name of a human being. He became haughty and proud, so he was cursed by a sage to become a serpent. Of course, these examples are taken from Hindu mythology. I mean, this is an example for showing, proving one aspect as taught in the Yoga Sutra. When you do something terribly wrong, either speaking a terrible word which hurts other people, or you perform a terrible deed which is harmful to others and also to yourself, what happens? You are taking a hit, you are actually beginning to fall down the ladder of your evolution. This is what happens. Similarly, when you do something wonderful, something noble, something that becomes a blessing to others, you are ascending, you are climbing up the step of ladder. So, this is how a different kind of evolution is put forward by Patanjali system of philosophy. So there's an evolution taking place which is not the subject of discussion in modern science, or it was never. So this evolution helps the body. Well, I can extend this example. We can never imagine a person who is habitually doing wrong things all the time, speaking wrong words all the time, thinking wrong thoughts all the time, remaining physically and mentally healthy and happy. It is inconceivable. So, I don't want to bring the concept of psychosomatic connection. I don't want to do that. Again, because I won't enter an area in which I am not a specialist. So modern medicine is your area. Some of your doctors were watching this, so I won't intrude into your jurisdiction. But I can say that it can be, this is a fact which is quite obvious to any medical professional. That's why today you find in hospitals and healthcare centers, they ask you to meditate, they ask you, they would not have done maybe 20 years ago, but now they would ask you to meditate and thinking positively. Actually, you cannot really think positively by wanting to think positively. Positivity is not something that we can choose. When I can go to market, buy something, you cannot do that. You should be always positive. To be positive in thought, you should do something positive in deed. So without practicing positivity in real life, you cannot just always be positive, think positive. I need not give the example. These business executives going through these training sessions where they had to stand up and throw up their hands to the sky, and don't you feel energy filling up the body, and then you repeat 100 times, I shall succeed and I shall succeed, and then you repeat and pay $500 per day, and you come back. That way, it may work for some time, but the point is, it doesn't change the person's mind. So, here, Vijnana Bhikshu makes the statement dharmasya adharma rupa pratibandha apasarana dwara. So, dharma means virtues, higher values, positive values. Positive values, this means not concepts. Positive actions, positive thinking, positive living, practicing positivity in action, word and thought. Then what happens? That becomes a spiritual force which removes the obstacles of negativity. That's why dharmasya adharma rupa pratibandha apasarana dwara. Dharma or virtues, higher values, do have the faculty, the ability to remove the negativity in the form of adharma. Adharma apasarana dwara, by removing, by eradicating adharma. And this adharma, this negativity can be related to mind, body and sense organs, our natural tendency to think in the wrong way, our tendency to see the wrong things. An example of using our faculty of sight, the eyes, to see wrong things, to hear wrong things, all these are. So, these are different ways of accumulating adharma through sense organs. All these can be removed by dharma. That is what Vijnana Bhikshu says here. The example of King Nahusha becoming a serpent due to a curse that he incurred from a sage. There is a mythological reference here. A king, Nahusha, he became very haughty and cruel. As a result, he was cursed by a sage. He was hiding in a palanquin. The sage called, "Come out, you serpent," and he became a snake and came out as a snake. That story. Because, of course, he got back his original shape later when he came in contact with Yudhishthira, who was a great man, the eldest Pandava brother. So that's how the story goes. So this is the essence of the third sutra, which is very prominent in the Kaivalyapada. Now we will go to the fourth sutra. The fourth sutra is Nirmana Chittani Asmida Matrat. Nirmana Chittani means minds. Minds produced by yogi through these positive thoughts and positive spiritual practices. Asmida Matrat. It comes from Asmita. Now, the point is, the essence of it is this. All our experiences are linked to both positive and negative karma. It is called Shubha, Ashubha. Ashubha means negative, unhelpful, harmful. Shubha means auspicious, positive. In other words, all our experiences today, or right now, in this life, are somehow caused by some actions, some experiences we already had in the past, which may be good and bad. So, this is the essence of it. Now, at the same time, the Yoga Sutra tells you that our purpose is, the purpose of yoga practice is to realize our true identity with Purusha, the Atman. Now, and that is our real purpose. So how do you reconcile the concept of the law of karma and our reaching back or our realizing our true identity that we are Atman? So that's the idea behind. Now the point is, our purpose is to identify our true nature, which is Atman, Purusha. But at the same time, the road that leads us towards that higher destination is the road created by dharma and adharma, good actions and bad actions. Good actions produce positive results, dharma, and bad action produces negative result. No negative action can ever affect or influence our true identity, Atman. That's an important thing. At the same time, negative actions can create a barrier. Just like, suppose you have a mirror. If there is a lot of dust on the surface of the mirror, the sun doesn't fully reflect on the mirror. It doesn't affect the sun, but it affects the mirror's ability to correctly reflect the sunlight. The sun remains unaffected, but the mirror's ability to reflect the sunlight becomes affected by the presence of dust on the surface. So, if there is the impact of negativity, if there is dust on the surface of the mirror, then you need a piece of cloth to wipe off that dust. So, wrong actions, negativity, adharma may create barriers, but adharma can be removed, or the barriers, obstacles created by adharma or negativity can be removed by dharma. The opposite of adharma is dharma. So that practice that's the essence of yoga disciplines. Now the point is, you can find another important thing is, anyone who takes to yoga, what he's actually doing is, he is actually taking up taking the purpose. He's taking up this important goal, the purpose of removing the obstacles that stand in the way of his manifestation of his identity with Atman. Because right now, because a lot of dust, a lot of filth, the mirror doesn't correctly represent or reflect the Atman. It should be removed. So, all the yoga disciplines, and in the yoga disciplines, according to Vijnana Bhikshu, in his commentary on the first sadhana pada sutra, that is the definition of Kriya Yoga, tapaswadhyaya ishara pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. According to Vijnana Bhikshu, that sutra also refers to dedication to a spiritual ideal, practicing karma yoga, doing your duty without any selfish purpose, developing devotion to God, doing something good for others, reading holy scriptures, repeating pranava, or that is svadhyaya. All these are included. When we do all these, what happens is actually speeding up his evolution. If a person doesn't take up yoga practices, disciplines, if he doesn't practice yamas and niyamas, he also will reach the goal, maybe after a few billions of life cycles. But if he takes to yoga, he may reduce that long journey, maybe radically he may reduce to just a few life cycles. So yogis try to speed up their evolution. For that, I'm trying to give a background for the next sutra. So you know what they do. Therefore, they want to exhaust the karma phalas. If this body has come into existence, and if this mind and chitta have come into existence, if we are born with a particular set of characteristics, it's all linked to some prarabdha karmas, some karmas coming from previous life. Now, these karmas have to be exhausted. For that, what do? According to Yoga Sutra, yogi produces innumerable minds and innumerable bodies. Chitta vyuha and kaya vyuha. These two terms are used here. You can find that in the next sutras you find. Chitta vyuha and kaya vyuha. It doesn't mean that he produces so many bodies. What happens, he wants to speed up his evolution. For that, he facilitates experiencing different things in this life. Well, I can give an example. This is one example I can give. There is an interesting story of a great saint who lived in 16th century. His name is Madhusudana Saraswati. He is famous for writing the most prominent dialectical critique work on Advaita Vedanta during the post-Shankarite period. The name of the book is Advaita Siddhi. It's a very complex dialectical work. It will take several years to study it under a master, and you can never really study the book properly without a great teacher who has studied from his teacher. It's a very complicated dialectical work on Advaita dialectics. He wrote a number of other devotional poems also. Bhakti Rasayanam, these are important books on devotion, bhakti. But his another well-known book is Gudhartha Deepika. It's a commentary on Bhagavad Gita following the footsteps of Shankaracharya. He was a great follower of Shankaracharya. He belonged to that tradition. Now, he lived in Benares, and one day he was walking. Those of you, I think many of you know, Benares, an ancient city, is mentioned in the Vedic literature, in the Puranas, so supposed to be, at least by many historians, the most ancient city that still survives. So, Kashi, it's called Kashi or Benares. The ancient name is Kashi. So he was living in Kashi. He was a great, well-known scholar of Kashi in the 16th century. So one day he was walking through the narrow streets of Kashi. So it is said, when he reached one spot, he tore a piece of his cloth. Monks in those days and even now, they wear just a dhoti and a chadar, an upper garment, light garment, in these orange robes of monks, Hindu monks. So wearing only that, and as he was walking, he stopped for some time and he took up his upper garment and tore it off, a piece. And as he took one or two steps further, a stone fell from the second floor of the building on one side of the street. And immediately he stopped and with that torn piece of cloth, which was ready in his hands to use, he covered that wound and walked again. So later somebody asked him, I knew it was coming, but I was ready for it. That was his answer. Now, one may dismiss this as some kind of an accident. You are most welcome to do that. But the point is, many of the great practitioners of yoga, they know that taking to yoga or any spiritual discipline, they know that they won't be totally, they cannot totally avoid the problem coming, but they will know how to face the problem, or they'll be ready for that problem. The problem or the obstacle will not have a devastating impact on their mind. So, a yogi, in other words, he takes a totally different perspective. He knows that everything is an attempt to get his karmas exhausted. And for that, through spiritual practices, he makes his minds ready. And that process is called creating different minds. It's not that he creates different minds. His mind will be ready. So mind will have different dimensions. His mind, he will develop different psychological dimensions with which he will be able to handle the reality of the present life. And he also will be physically ready for it. Now you can see this fifth sutra, Pravritti Bhede Prayojagam Chittam Ekam Anekesham. This sutra, it needs a lot of explanation. It's again related to speeding up the evolutionary process by a yogi. He is actually speeding up the evolutionary process. Now, before taking up the sutra, I should give a general picture of this, the dynamics of this process of speeding up evolution. According to yoga and according to Vedanta, according to both these systems of philosophy, the present life is closely linked to the previous life. Our karmas, or rather actually karma phalas, the results of karma, actions, and the results. That's the meaning. When we talk about karma, we are also including the results of karmas. Belong to three categories. Technically, it is called in Sanskrit Sanjita karma, Agamika karma, and Prarabdha karma. Sanjita karma means accumulated karma phalas, accumulated experiences, actions, and the results. Prarabdha karma means a portion of these accumulated karmas are responsible for the present life and the present experiences. Again, we should remember, it in no way implies predeterminism. That is a very important point to remember. The doctrine of karma is the antithesis. It is an open refutation of predeterminism. That's an important. There is, of course, there was a school of predeterminism in India in ancient times, but Vedanta and Yoga do not accept that. Vedanta and Yoga takes the very opposite view. So our present life, see, we are born in a family, born in a country, speaking one language, eating certain kinds of food, dress code, and things like that, and then we go on. We going through different highways and bylanes and different roads, different experiences. Some of them good, some of them may not be so very good in this life. All these are the different manifestations of the fruition of one set of karmas, and that is called prarabdha karma. Now, what is prarabdha means? In Sanskrit means prakashena arabdha. Karmas which are already started, which have begun to take fruition. That is called prarabdha karmas. Sanchita karmas are those karmas which have not yet starting fruition. So, your present life, your education, the family in which you are born, or your characteristics, habits, all are different forms of the manifestations of these prarabdha karmas. The second category means karmas which have already started manifesting, as a result of which we have got this body, this culture, these habits, and so on. Agami karma means karmas which are yet to come. That will the result of what we are going to do in future. These are three types of karmas. Now, a yogi knows that he cannot really escape the fruition of karmas which are already started manifesting. It's called prarabdha karma. He cannot escape. But a yogi can speed up his own spiritual evolution by quickly finishing his karma phalas. And for that, he produces innumerable bodies called Kaya Vyuha and Chitta Vyuha. Body is one, mind is one. But various prototypes of his physical body he can create. How a yogi does? He does it through samyama. Remember, we are not discussing something which cannot be demonstrated or proved in a laboratory. Those who take to higher yoga alone can even intellectually fully understand the implications of this. Well, I can give one example, and it's very obvious. Suppose, this morning I was giving a talk based on the life of Girish Chandra Ghosh. Girish Chandra Ghosh was a drunkard and profligate bohemian man who lived a wayward life, never cared for anybody. He was a creative genius. He was a writer, playwright, and dramatist, an actor, and many things more. And many things are not so very admirable in his life also. This was the type of man he was. But after coming to Sri Ramakrishna, he got a new mind. Chitta means mind. A mind, but after coming in contact with Sri Ramakrishna, his mind began to change. He got a new mind. That's the only way we can say. Remember, mind is, we don't know how to define the mind. Our emotions and feelings and attitudes and tendencies all are different manifestations of mind. His thoughts and impulses and feelings and emotions all underwent a complete, radical, dramatic change, transformation. So he got a new mind. Similarly, when people take to spiritual life, when they take to practice of meditation, their mind begins to change. In the sense, their feelings, the way they look at life, the way they interact with others also can change. Similarly, when they move in the opposite direction, when they become extremely worldly and selfish and crooked and, I don't want to go the list, then also their mind will change. And I'm sure you know very well that people's body also will change when they take to the opposite direction. So that's the implication here. Now, a yogi doesn't have to depend upon the forces of nature for this to happen. He can use his power of samyama and dharana to adopt a new mind, a set of new minds and bodies, and he can exhaust his karmas, vasanas. He knows, he gets a glimpse of the forces which are responsible for his present life, prarabdha karmas. He may not write a book on it, but when he thinks, when he contemplates, he gets an idea of something that is not empirically intelligible. This can happen to many spiritual seekers when they take to meditation, when they take to serious contemplation. The first thing that happens to any spiritual seeker who is sincere is they start seeing and experiencing something beyond the empirical, beyond the world of the senses, beyond the world that is obvious in front of us. They feel like connecting with something transcendental. They may not be willing to express it openly. It may not last long, depending upon their sincerity, their consistency with which they practice. Even as I mentioned earlier, if you practice yamas and niyamas, we can even experiment in prisons among students. You try to encourage students in schools and colleges or prisoners to practice yamas and niyamas. You find their minds begin to change. And when mind changes, thoughts and mind will also influence what they eat, how they live, what they do, how they interpret life, and that will certainly change body also, really speaking. Now, a yogi doesn't depend upon these external factors. He is already a master of yamas and niyamas. He has complete control over his emotions and feelings through his willpower, samyama, that is dharana, dhyana and samadhi. The 6th, 7th and 8th of Ashtanga Yoga, which is called samyama. He can take a strong will and he can start practicing certain disciplines in his life. Normal persons also may take a vow, tomorrow onwards I shall meditate, 8 o'clock. When the 8 o'clock comes, well, today I have something else to do, maybe tomorrow onwards I shall begin that. We may postpone, we may find excuses for not doing. All this happen, really speaking. But a yogi is not like that. When he takes a decision, there is nothing that stands in his way. Not that he has to fight obstacles, but obstacles do not really exist for a yogi, because he is a master of his mind, of his senses. That's the idea behind. So, in other words, he will try to exhaust his prarabdha karmas through voluntarily going through certain disciplines, which either completely neutralizes some prarabdha karmas, or there are some prarabdha karmas which cannot be neutralized. He can radically reduce the intensity of his experiences. A person who is destined to be, let's say, bitten by a cobra, he may be bitten maybe by a scorpion, maybe some kind of a insect, like that. So the intensity of his sufferings will be reduced. And this principle applies to the practitioners of yoga and also the practitioners of bhakti, devotion. So, as I've been giving the example of Girish Chandra Ghosh, who was the subject of discussion in today's Sunday lecture. He got a new body. He became a relatively healthy person, because when he got a new mind, he stopped drinking and he started living a very disciplined life. That certainly changes your body, your senses, your thoughts, your minds. But a yogi doesn't have to take any instruction from anybody. Yogi can practice this through samyama. But other persons will have to take instruction through his strong faith and sincerity from great spiritual teachers. Then they have full faith, they also can speed up their evolution by exhausting the prarabdha karmas. That's the idea behind. Okay, now we will have interaction. You are most welcome. Of course, I shall just read the next two sutras. Tatra dhyanajam anasrayam. Among these chittas, this new mind, the new chittam, which is born out of samadhi, it is totally devoid of karma and vasanas. Because karmas and vasanas mean tendencies, and tendencies that prompt you to certain actions. These are the problems which they are responsible for creating new bondages, new chains that bind us to this world. But a mind that is born out of this, it's called dhyanajam chittam, that is from samadhi, this new higher mind comes. That mind doesn't prompt you into any actions which can create further bondages. Then of course there is seventh sutra is there. Karma asukla akrishnam yoginaha trividam idaresham. Yoginaha, of the yogis. Karma is asukla akrishna, means it is ashukla. Ashukla actually means he doesn't do anything with a selfish motive. He has surrendered himself completely to God. So it is called Ashukla. And then it is called Akrishna. Akrishna means it is not linked to any kleshas. There is no klesha involved there. I mean, there is no neither punya nor papa. There is neither any positive results or negative results, because both are binding in the higher sense in spiritual life. So a mind that is born out of this higher samadhi experience is free from the bondages of dharma, punya, papa, etc. I think it's already time. You can ask questions. If you don't have questions, you shall continue with the sutras. Most welcome. Yeah, ask questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
There's a question from Facebook that came up first, and there are no hands up yet from the Zoom class, but there was also a question on YouTube. The Facebook question, and you've covered this before in both series, but it's come up again. It says, Swamiji, can you please translate what you're saying in the invocation at the beginning?
Oh, yeah, the sutta. Okay. Yeah. So, yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sarirasya cha vaidyakena yopankurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalihi anatosmi. This is the first one. So, here is a reference to Patanjali. The Patanjali is supposed to have made 3 distinct contributions. His contribution to yoga, his contribution to Ayurveda, and his contribution to Sanskrit grammar. And the purpose of his writing these books was to remove malam. Actually literally means dirt or filth, something that we want to get rid of. Bobby, I want to confirm, they are referring to the invocation. Yes. So okay, that's fine. So malam means something that you want to get rid of. So he wrote this Yoga Sutras to remove the dirt and filth of human mind, negativity, wrong vrittis, vasanas, samskaras, tendencies, impulses, attitudes, things that stand in our way of spiritual life, and so on. To remove this, he wrote this well-known book, Yoga Sutras, 195 sutras in 4 chapters: Samadhipada, Sadhanapada, Vibhudipada, Kaivalyapada. This is his great contribution, and he is supposed to have written this as a tool for us to purify our mind. The second contribution is his well-known contribution to Sanskrit grammar. Remember, it's Patanjala Mahabhashyam it is called. Mahabhashyam means the great commentary. It is the last word on Sanskrit grammar. So Sanskrit grammar has 3 well-known scholars. It's called Holy Trinity, Patanjali, Katyayana, and the original writer, the original teacher was Panini. So the genesis of Sanskrit grammar is Panini's Sutras, Ashtadhyayi, in 8 chapters, which is very brief. You can print the whole of all the sutras. You can perhaps print maybe in about 25-30 pages, small print, and they cannot be understood without a teacher who explains with the help of a commentary. It is totally unapproachable without the help of a teacher. So it's more like learning higher mathematics or engineering. I mean, much more complicated. That's the only difference. In fact, the discovery of Panini's work it led to a revolution in modern linguistics, in philology, and so on. It was one of the great events that took place in the later half of 18th century, and anyway, so that's it's called Ashtadhyayi. Another great teacher came, Katyayana, who wrote again commentary. But the largest effort to interpret Panini's grammar was the contribution of Patanjali, who wrote Mahabhashyam. It's a huge work, Patanjali Mahabhashyam. So, this is an important thing to remember. So, that he wrote to help us to speak language properly, to pronounce words properly. According to him, when you speak a language, you should not be excited, and also it should not create excitement in other people's minds who listen to you. So language is a divine vehicle for not just a tool for communication, but it's an instrument for expressing ideas with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. So this Patanjali's contribution to grammar. The third contribution that he made was Ayurveda. According to some scholars, it is a commentary, Charaka Samhita. Some people say Charaka Samhita itself is his work. Anyway, we are not sure. So his third contribution was his work on Ayurveda, which he wrote just to help you to purify your body. It's a book on Indian School of Medicine. So that is and actually Yaha Apakarod means the one who removed the dirt and filth from human mind by writing Yoga Sutras, for human speech by writing this great book on grammar, and from human body by writing a book on Ayurveda. And I prostrate before him, I bow down to him. This is the meaning of the first invocation. Second one that goes along with this is very common, but other one is not frequently recited by many teachers, but according to the tradition to which I belong, the teacher from whom I studied, who were all staunch Advaitins, is the second invocation is a expression of respect and reverence to three great sages who are again connected to yoga tradition. Stuve Patanjalim Vyasam Shankaram cha Munitrayam Kartru Sutrasya Bhashyasya Pramad Vivaranasya cha. So I praise, I bow down these three great sages. Munitrayam means the Holy Trinity. So it means the three great saints or sages, who is the Patanjali, the author of Sutras, and Vyasa, who is the author of the first original commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and Shankaracharya, who wrote a sub-commentary on Vyasa's commentary on the Patanjali Sutra. It's called Vivarana. So I bow down, I pay respect to these three great holy saints. This is the meaning of the second invocation. I hope it's clear.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
There are two hands raised now from the Zoom class and a question that preceded that from YouTube.
Yeah.
Which would you like to take first?
I can take any. No problem. Please, your choice.
Sri Ram, your hand was up, and then I'll take the YouTube question, and then Yogi.
Yeah.
Swamiji, today you mentioned that the goal Swami Vivekananda mentioned for education, and also the kshetra with analogy, is to remove the obstacles.
Yeah.
You said last class or the class before that the maximum achievable from this is only chitta shuddhi.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now...
How to get beyond chitta?
Yeah. Thank you. Now, you should remember, of course, Swami Vivekananda, in his commentaries on Yoga Sutras, he has linked Yoga's philosophy to Vedanta philosophy. Unlike the mainstream commentators like Vyasa, Bhoja, who wrote Rajamatanda, or Bhaswati Harihararanya, or Vijnana Bhikshu, who wrote Shivartiga, or Vajaspati, who wrote Tattwamayananda. You know, remember, Swamiji has written the most intelligible and the most natural, rational interpretation of Yoga Sutras. If Swami Vivekananda had just written just a commentary on Yoga Sutras, just like following Vyasa, he would not, his purpose would not have served. Swamiji considers Yoga Sutra as a springboard to Vedanta, which is the traditional view of Shankaracharya also. So remember, so you find in many of Swamiji's writings, instead of the word Purusha, Swamiji uses the word Atman, or the soul. You find that. Now, you don't find that in many of the traditional commentaries of Yoga Sutras. They go by Patanjali's own concept. Now, in 19th century, Swamiji brought Yoga Sutra here. He was trying to give a most common sense and intelligible. Intelligibility was very important. The first attempt to introduce yoga to Western world. So he is interpreting Yoga Sutras, sometimes connecting it to Vedanta. So you find Swamiji using the word Atman, soul, in place of Purusha, which is not the normal practice of the yoga commentators. That's why if you read an ordinary commentary, either Vasudhi or Vyasa, you don't see anything very transcendental in that. They talk about Vibhudis, they talk about all these things. But you don't find any connection with Vedanta. So, point to remember. Now coming to subject to mainstream, to the connection between the traditional Patanjali yoga philosophy and Vedanta. Shankaracharya considers yoga as a Samana Siddhanta, which means Sankhya Yoga or Samana Siddhanta means there are many things in Sankhya Yoga that Shankaracharya accepts, not the whole. For example, the analysis of the Antakaranas and the concept of samskaras, vrittis, vasanas, all these directly from Sankhya Yoga, Vedantis have accepted. But Vedanta is a monistic system and Patanjali is a dualistic system. Vedanta is a non-dualistic system, Advaita Vedanta. And Patanjali is a dualist. It means anyone who accepts more than one absolute reality. Patanjali accepts Purusha and Prakriti as two fundamental absolute categories, fundamental categories. Shankaracharya would have nothing of that. He would, according to him, Brahman is the only one reality. And you cannot say, in fact, in Shankaracharya's commentaries, there are many statements. Apparently, Shankaracharya takes objections from Sankhya and Yoga. Sankhya is called Pradhanamalla, the main exponent, the main opponent, the main objector. And there are long statements in the Bhashya where the objector, the opposite view, says, well, your Atma is like our Purusha, no difference. Shankaracharya is projecting a view as if coming from Sankhya's yoga tradition. Then he says totally different. Because Purusha is self-effulgent, but Purusha always needs Prakriti to act. The graphic picture of Purusha Prakriti combination in Sankhyakarika is like, Purusha is self-effulgent, but it cannot walk. Prakriti is dumb. Prakriti is jada. It is blind, but very strong. So Purusha is standing on the shoulders of Prakriti. That's how creation begins. So it is a Purusha Prakriti combination that is responsible for creation. According to Vedanta, Shankaracharya asked the question. And according to Sankhya Yoga, Prakriti is the original source of creation or evolution. How can Prakriti, which is Jada, which is non-effulgent, be the cause of creation, evolution? Cannot be. How can something which is essentially non-effulgent be the cause of evolution? Prakriti is the original source of all evolution according to your yoga view. So Shankaracharya gives a lot of arguments, and so he contradicts this Sankhya's argument that your Atma is like a Purusha. No, it isn't. So here is an important point. First of all, Advaita Vedanta is purely non-dualistic, and yoga is pure dualism. In Shankaracharya philosophy, he uses the word Dvaita. These things, some of you should look at the history also, So Siddhanta Vivasthasu Dvaitino Nischida Dridham Parasparam Viruddhyandi Taihi Ayam Na Viruddhyandi. It comes in Mandukya Karika, Gaudapada Karika. What it says is these dualists are fighting among themselves. My view is right, your view is wrong. But Advaita has no problem with anyone. Now the point is, Dvaita, the word is used in Gaudapada's Karika. Okay, Gaudapada lived in 6th century AD. And Madhvacharya lived in 12th century AD. Almost 600 years later. So some people ask me the question, how Gaudapada used the word Dvaita? Dvaita Siddhanta is the name, dualism, the name of a system of philosophy founded by Madhvacharya in 12th century AD. And Gaudapada lived 150 years before Shankaracharya. In 6th century AD, Shankara came 778 according to most of the AD. So, whenever Shankaracharya uses the word Dvaita, he is not talking about Madhvacharya, he is talking about Sankhya Yoga systems. That's an important thing to remember. So, he cannot agree with Sankhya Yoga system because that Dvaitins mean they accept two fundamental, totally different and absolutely eternal realities, which is diametrically opposed to the fundamental tenets of Advaita. Is it clear?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Maharaj, I'm going to ask Yogi for a little more patience while I read the question from YouTube. Actually, there are two questions, and I'm going to read them together so we can get to the Zoom students' question faster. They're related questions. The first question is, sattva can be disturbed by the types of food we consume? ? Is it true that sattvic food can assist in transforming our mind into more sattvic tendencies? Please, Swamiji, what is Vedanta's take on it?
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and ask the other question because it goes, takes another step with the same question. After someone has concentrated on sattvic qualities for a certain period and focused on being a sakshi to their thoughts and happenings, external and internal, and having been able to generate the sankalpas that one wants, and also be a witness to that, after developing those abilities with dispassion, what is the next stage after that for us? What is the step after developing the ability to witness really well?
Yeah. Okay, the first question about sattvic food, really sattvic food can certainly help us to generate sattvic feelings, sattvic tendencies, sattvic attitudes, so for concentration, for mental and physical health. Absolutely no doubt about it. But you should always remember, sattvic food should not be narrowly defined to mean a kind of food to the exclusion of another type of food. This is a very important point. Remember, I was asked this question. Remember, I am an absolute vegetarian who cannot even touch with my hands anything like fish or meat. I cannot even touch. But I will tell you, very frankly, there were great sattvic people who were non-vegetarians. There were terrible scourges of humanity who were vegetarians. Remember, Hitler, it is said, later turned to be vegetarian due to some That's what historians say. You don't say that he was a sattvic man. Christ was a non-vegetarian in the sense, Christ's parables deal with distributing fish among people, And you don't see he was the embodiment of sattvic qualities. So where do you draw the line? You have to remember all this. So, because there is always a problem in defining what is sattvic. But remember, there is no doubt about it that for a beginner in spiritual life, maybe vegetarian food, as many people say, is certainly very helpful. But remember, vegetarianism should not be considered to be especially spiritual or sattvic as such. Remember, for a beginner in spiritual life, vegetarian food is certainly helpful, much more helpful. But remember, there were great men and great women, some of the great epoch makers in different religious traditions, who were not vegetarians. So I want to mention this point. So sattvic food certainly can help us in spiritual life. Extending the meaning further, sattvic food not only means cooked in a particular way, but was served in a particular way and consumed with a particular attitude. All these can increase the sattvic quality of anything that we eat. This is a very important thing to remember. The second question, I think, sattvic food and sankalpas. You say, okay, now it is true. As I mentioned, for a beginner in spiritual life, sattvic food is very important. Sattvic food in the higher sense can mean food that is pure externally and consumed with the proper attitude, served with the proper attitude. That can be defined as sattvic food. It's a very important thing to remember. So, sattvic food certainly can generate sattvic sankalpas, vasanas, and can help us moving forward in spiritual life. There's no doubt about it.
Maharaj, that question goes a little further.
Yeah,
and
please.
The question does ask what after one develops the ability to witness oneself, to be dispassionate.
Yeah.
What's the next stage after that?
Yeah, after you practice this sattvic food, sattvic sankalpas and dispassion, then one should try to concentrate on reinforcing yamas and niyamas. Because there are two levels at which we internalize yamas and niyamas. Ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigriha, shauja, santosha, tapasya, adhyaya, isapanitha. That means non-violent, non-stealing, non-possessiveness and purity of life and contentment and inner and external purity, and then practicing certain verbal symbols in spiritual meaning and dedication to God. With all these values, there are two levels. First, when we enter spiritual life, this is what we do actually. So at the beginning of our spiritual journey, we actually imbibe many of these qualities. Without that, we cannot even enter spiritual life. So, by the time a person has already become little more withdrawn, more sattvic and full of sattvic sankalpas, he must have already imbibed a lot of the yamas and niyamas. But as we go on, when you practice pratyahara, you also go deeper in internalizing yamas and niyamas. Is that important? Because pratyahara means you withdraw your mind away from all sense objects. So that you do by creating a counter higher spiritual focus within. So for that, you should go deeper in practicing yamas and niyamas. And at that, when you practice pratyahara, you'll be able to practice a lot of detachment. And you'll be able to go deeper into yamas and niyamas. And then one should practice dharana, concentration. I mean, increasing the amount of time we spend on meditative disciplines. Dharana is the first stage, dhyana is the second stage. But remember, you should not write this in your agenda or your diary. That is a terrible mistake. Spiritual journey cannot be analyzed through a GPS system. Remember that we can do only external things. How our mind travels, how we evolve is a different story. For that, we should not create a time frame, an agenda or writing diaries for first few months. It doesn't work like that. That can be a terrible obstacle actually. So it's an internal journey. And another important thing, as you go deeper into yamas and niyamas, as you internalize yamas and niyamas more intensely, you find our mind begins to evolve. That's what Patanjali is talking about. A new mind comes into existence. A new mind coming into existence means our thoughts begin to change. Our emotions and feelings begin to change. We feel a higher sublimity in our thoughts and words and everything. It means new mind is coming. So that's why, remember, new mind, that's the only word, in fact, the Yoga Sutra language is what I mentioned here, that is, I mentioned this. Nirmana Chittani Asmida Matrat. Nirmana Chittani means it is your mind that you have made. Actually, you are not making minds. As we evolve in spiritual life, that process is put in the language of Sutra. That means you are making a new mind. That means a new way of outlook, a new way of looking at life as a whole. That is called Nirmana Chittani. This you can find any time. So when you take the spiritual life, first you find a lot of obstacles. The old mind is telling you, no, stop, I won't let you meditate. But you persist and you read books, you practice sattvic food, sattvic sankalpas, then you'll find the obstacle, the opposition that the previous mind puts before you, it gets weaker and weaker. And a new personality appears to emerge. A new mind which you are trying to create, a mind that is happy with meditation. And this new mind is fighting with the old mind, and a mind which is not used to meditation. That's why the conflict arises. And you persist further, the old mind slowly begins to disappear. And that means you are moving forward in spiritual life. That's the idea behind it. I can give you an example. When you study a new subject, for example, engineering, medicine, whatever it is, as you study more and more, your thoughts begin to change, actually. I'm giving a very imperfect example, but I cannot give any perfect example from empirical world of ideas. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yogi, I'm sorry, Yogi.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah.
Sutra 5, Chittam Ekam Anekesh. That one is, one translation says multiple minds and bodies appear to be one.
Yeah.
And Swamiji's translation says the original mind which created these Chitta Vyuhas and Kaya Vyuhas controls them. Which translation is correct?
Swamiji's translation is much more intelligible, So what did Swamiji say? What does Swamiji say? You say, please repeat once more.
The original mind which created the other made up minds and bodies controls them.
Yeah.
That's how he translated it. Another translation says Chittam Ekam Anekesham, that is translated as multiple minds and bodies appear to be one.
Oh, Anekesham Chittam Ekam. So, Anekesham Chittam Ekam. Actually, what it means is here, Prayojagam means, that is the one who prompts, the one who regulates, or the one who controls all these newly made up minds, that mind is the original mind which is one. So, I shall try to tell you again in the context of the previous example I made. When you enter yoga practices, as you evolve further and further, when you reach a particular stage, a yogi can create many innumerable prototypes of his own mind. But those newly made minds are regulated, means prayojakam. The one which is prompting, is regulating all the newly made up minds is the original mind. So that's what Swamiji says. And essentially that's what the commentators also say. Anekesham chittam ekam. Anekesham means Anekesham pravritti bhedaga means different made up minds, pravritti bhede, in their different context, ekam chittam prayojakam, the one who controls, the one who regulates all these newly made up minds is the original mind. That's the idea behind. The idea that different minds are produced, it is a problem of language actually. It is not newly mind that's produced. As we move forward in spiritual life, yoga practices, the mind itself takes higher and higher forms, but the difference is a yogi does it at will. Yogi can do it at will to speed up the evolution by exhausting his prarabdha karmas. For that, he can create innumerable mental systems, but the regulator of those mental systems is the original mind itself. That's the idea behind.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.